Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to the channel and welcome as always to our coffee times to discuss movies and horror. And today, even though it is not 100% horror, I would say, I'm here to talk to you about Ari Aster's new film, Beau is Afraid.
It's coffee time.
When Ari Aster announced he was going to make a horror comedy, I was a little bit afraid because you guys know it. I'm not a huge lover of horror comedies in general, but I have faith because it is Ari Aster. So I knew it was not going to be one of those cheesy, cheaper horror comedies out there. I knew he was going to do something probably different, and different he did. So the moment that it was available here in the Netherlands, I went to watch it. The official release is the 11th of May, but I was able to see it a little bit in advance. It is considered, of course, an art house movie, and sometimes those movies here in the Netherlands, they don't run everywhere, or some of them are not even released in the cinema because I still have not been able to find Infinity Pool. It's also in no streaming service that I can buy, so I'm still waiting on that one. So I went to watch it the moment that I could, and I was ready for a 3-hour movie. I didn't drink anything beforehand and I was ready to watch the whole thing without having to leave the room, and I'm here to let you know my thoughts. It's mostly going to be spoiler free, but I'm gonna add a little section at the very end of this video with some spoilery thoughts, because I feel like for this film there is not way too much that I can actually tell you without spoiling things or with going too much into detail, because it's a long ass movie. So yeah, there's going to be a little section of spoilers at the end, but I will warn you before we get to that. Beau is Afraid is a surrealist, tragic comedy horror film, directed and written by Ari Aster. I believe this has been his most personal project so far, and he was able to basically convince A24 to give him the budget to make such a movie. And it is quite interesting because at the premiere of the film, Ari Aster himself said that he doesn't understand, or you know, he was surprised that A24 was stupid enough to fund this film, because it is honestly a movie that you're probably never gonna see something like this in the cinema again. Because it's a very personal film, and it is also a movie that it is not going to appeal to all viewers, and it is truly one of those movies that it is so abstract that everybody's also gonna get something different from it. But I guess that's also part of the beauty of the film. Hereditary and Midsommar had their weird moments. They were also not your typical straightforward film, but I feel like with Beau is Afraid he has reached another level. The movie is truly bizarre, and you gotta go to watch this film with a very open mind and an empty bladder. The film stars Joaquin Phoenix as the title character, Beau Wasserman, a mild-mannered but paranoia-ridden man who embarks on a surreal odyssey to get home, confronting his greatest fears along the way. When you meet Beau, he's an adult that is going to his therapy session and talking to his therapist. He gets prescribed a new drug, and that is where the movie kind of kickstarts. And after that, we basically follow Beau's journey. He's preparing to return to his hometown to visit his mother, and that is basically all that we know when we get introduced to the character. These are the facts. And like I said, after this, the movie starts to take us in a very interesting journey, in the journey of Beau trying to make it home to visit his mother. Honestly, when I started to think about this film after I watched it, I realized that it kind of felt a little bit like Big Fish, but on crack. That's kind of like how I would pitch this movie to you. Yeah, because Big Fish is also a journey film. And also a lot of weird things happen, and we also consider if they are happening in real life or in a character's imagination. So for me, this movie was a little bit similar in that sense, that it is also a journey that our main character is going through, and a lot of time we as the audience are unsure if the things we're seeing it's all in his mind or what is actually going on. But they are so surreal that you kind of cannot even conceive this to happen in real life. So in a way, it's like Big Fish on crack. When it comes to the structure of the film, I feel like it is the most kind of thing that makes sense, because it is basically 1 week more or less in the life of Beau, and that is all the structure that you get. The rest of the film is divided in several acts. There is many different sections of the movie, and they are very different from each other. At the center of the film we have Joaquin Phoenix with an absolutely amazing performance. I was not expecting less from him, especially after watching a movie like Joker. You already know what kind of actor you have at hand, and I feel like Ari Aster knew that he needed someone like Joaquin to make this movie work, because a lot of the impact that the movie is gonna have is if the main character, in this case Beau, is able to portray all the emotions that the main character is going through. And even though things might look batshit crazy, you have a main character that is able to give you the kind of basic human emotions, like, you know, being afraid, being scared, being nervous about things, and going through all of the happiness, sadness, everything that he is experiencing. Beau as a character is almost an adult that stopped mentally growing and it stays at heart a kid. Even the way that he moves, you know, the mannerisms and the way he speaks, it's almost like he's still a kid. And I feel like Joaquin has captured that wonderfully. Seems that Ari Aster loves family trauma, and that is something that he has already explored in Hereditary and Midsommar, and now we have another movie that does in a way explore trauma. It is interesting because in 2011 Ari Aster did have a short come out called Beau, and that is basically what this movie was inspired by. I have not watched that short, so I don't know if it's available somewhere, but if you read the synopsis, it's basically the same concept. Beau is Afraid almost felt like a movie within a movie, and there is sometimes parts of the film where I feel like I struggle with the rhythm of the movie, but all in all, even though this movie is 3 hours long, I didn't feel like it was dragging too much. Only when we were getting closer to the end, I felt like, you know, I didn't enjoy the third act as much as the other ones. My favorite part was still kind of like the first hour of the film. That was where my favorite moments were. One of my other favorite moments was when we go back in time. We have a flashback of when Beau was a teenager and he was on a trip on a ship with his mother. You can see this in the trailer. You can see how he looks like as a teenager in some of the posters that have been released. And the stylization of that trip and the visuals were absolutely amazing. And even the actor that plays the younger version of Joaquin Phoenix, it almost looked like they were kind of de-aging him in the film, and it was actually him. I really loved that segment of the movie, and I love to dive a little bit deeper into Beau's past, into something that could explain the things that he is going through in the present. I felt like at the beginning of the film, Ari Aster was still trying to have some sort of structure, and then at some point he just gave up on it, and it just turned into a nightmarish kind of trip. Weird, bizarre, very metaphorical, everything, and I am sure that many viewers are gonna get lost in this film. And it's also 3 hours long, which it doesn't help when you have such a kind of, you know, stylized film and a movie that requires so much attention by the audience in order to understand the things that are being kind of explained in a more artistical way, not so straightforward. So it requires a lot of like mental attention from the viewers, and if you require that for 3 hours long, it can happen that towards the end a lot of people have stopped paying as much attention. You also go through all the genres here, you know, it's like a crime thriller, a comedy, it is a drama. There are horror aspects in the film, but I feel like at its core it is not a horror movie. It is a complete different thing by itself. It is an odyssey. It is a journey. There are some brutal parts, there are some deaths, there is some blood, but I would not consider this a horror movie. So when it comes to the horror, I would say that there were some interesting moments that I really enjoyed, especially some horror slash comedy moments that happened in an attic that I thought were hilarious, and I will never be able to remove those visuals from my brain. As for my final thoughts, I ended up giving this movie a 3.5 out of 5. I feel like it is very clear from the very beginning that this movie is kind of set in an alternate reality, and it is a bizarre journey that we as the viewer are going through together with our main character. For me personally, I really enjoy the movie. I feel like there were so many good moments, so many good lines. The visuals were absolutely stunning, and it offered so many different things when it comes to the visuals because we have so many different chapters inside of the movie. However, I also feel like this was such a personal movie for the director that he didn't take so much into consideration the audience and keeping them on board with his story. So, you know, sometimes when you have a director that makes a movie that is just so personal to them, it is really hard to engage and connect with the audience throughout the whole film because it is kind of very niche. So I feel like just for that, I take a couple of points from it, I guess. But I would recommend you guys to give it a chance if you don't mind really bizarre, out there movies and you're willing to sit for 3 hours watching a lot of crazy stuff. However, for me, even though this is probably his most personal project, my favorite one I think is still gonna remain Midsommar for now. But again, this is Ari Aster we're talking about, which means that, you know, when you watch Hereditary or you watch Midsommar a second, a third time, you discover new things. When you watch Beau is Afraid, it's almost as if someone is retelling you their weirdest dreams and, you know, taking you through their wildest dreams. I think though that same as with Hereditary and Midsommar, when you watch them a second and a third time, there is a lot more layers to it and you see things completely different after a second or a third watch. So I feel like if you would go and watch this movie again, your perspective on things might change. And now we're gonna take it to a little teeny tiny spoiler section. So you have been warned, I'm gonna get into a couple of spoilers. If you have not seen the movie yet, do not move forward with the video. When we first meet Beau, as I've mentioned before, we see him going to visit his therapist, and the therapist has the feeling that Beau is holding a lot of guilt because, as we learn later on in the film, Beau's father died when he basically was making him during conception. His father passed away, and so Beau has been carrying this guilt all his life because also his mother keeps reminding him that the reason his father is dead is because, you know, they had sex to have Beau. So basically Beau is going to return home on the anniversary of his father's death, which is also the day he was conceived, to visit his mom. And the therapist already has a feeling that this is going to be a very eventful journey to make it home. But not only mentally, it's also going to be a lot of physical barriers there that he's gonna have to go through in order to get home. It almost looks like an endless adventure for him. Everything will happen to him until he can make it home. The way that the world building works for Beau is almost like anxieties are being just topped one on top of the other on top of the other, building up a tower of anxieties. And we're going to also see some flashbacks that are going to let us know what are the fears that Beau has. He's scared of not having enough personal space. He's scared of not being to please others. He's struggling with guilt and anxiety. And if, for example, he sees something in the news that is happening, then he's immediately going to think it's going to happen to him. It's there at his door. And it's quite interesting how we see this character going through so many anxiety-driven moments and overthinking, OCD moments. And funny enough, I have seen myself reflected in the movie multiple times. I do struggle with anxiety and OCD. My anxiety comes mostly from my OCD. There's a lot of tics and things that I have that I know they are purely my OCD, and I know they don't make any like logical sense. I know those are irrational fears that I have and irrational kind of things that I check over and over again because of my OCD, but at the same time I cannot control it. So there were a lot of moments that I could see myself reflected in Beau. So I feel like people that do struggle with anxiety, OCD, and this all of these things, irrational fears, those are things that I have. I feel like those people are going to be able to see themselves reflected in the film here and there. There were many lines that that Joaquin Phoenix was delivering that really hit hard for me. And it was quite interesting for me to see. So I did interpret this movie as a person going through a lot of anxiety, OCD, personal trauma, you know, mommy issues. There was a lot of trauma here being explored and a lot of things that would pile up for the main character. But there were so many things that happened in the movie, you know, like being scared of somebody breaking into your apartment or losing your keys. Like all of these things are things that I am also obsessed about all the time. The thing is just in this movie things are basically being like multiplied by 1,000 and everything is like on steroids. The most kind of depressing moments of the film were actually when Beau was answering the phone. He has the first conversation with his mother to the phone that was really heartbreaking because you can feel how he's getting smaller and smaller during that conversation, and how he relies on other people to make decisions for him because he doesn't want to disappoint people. He doesn't want to feel guilty if he makes the wrong decision. You know, decision making is a really big problem for him. In most ways he's still like a kid because of the way he was raised up with this fear. He has fear also of sexual interactions or, you know, being with females because basically his mother has told him, if you sleep with a woman, you're gonna die like your father. So he's been like with that fear and that guilt and that struggle his whole life. And at the end of the day, I feel like this is a very personal project for Ari Aster. I do think that it is a great movie. I would still recommend people to go and watch it, even though you might not understand everything from the get-go, even though you might be confused, but it's part of the beauty of the film. And I would like to rewatch it at some point because I'm really sure that I would see certain things differently a second time around. And also for me, I think that I enjoyed the couple first acts more than the last ones. My favorite parts were when he was at the beginning in his apartment and he was like struggling with the notes his neighbor was passing even though he didn't have any music on, when he had to go get water and people were breaking into his apartment, like all of those bits. And when he was taken by the people that ran him over and they were kind of taking care of him, all of those were my favorite parts. I think when he escapes into the woods and meets these kind of people that live in the woods and put up a play, that's when I started to get a bit less interested. That's where things started to not be as interesting for me. Then when he arrived home with his mom, that piqued my interest again, and I feel like the acting in that act was absolutely fantastic. And then towards the end it gets very, very weird again, and yeah, but it has many good moments. And like I said, I think this is a great movie and not a movie everybody's gonna love or understand, and that is fine. I think that thanks to the success from Hereditary and Midsommar, Ari Aster was granted this kind of it's almost like a privilege to be able to put your vision out there in such a bold way. But I'm really happy for him that he got the chance, and I do like that A24 is giving people the chance to make movies that are different, that it's not your typical Hollywood blockbuster, because we have enough of those. So it doesn't matter if you truly love this film, understand it or not. I feel like getting movies like this are really important also for people that love cinema, and it's giving you kind of a very intimate view of the director's brain and traumas and things that maybe he has been going through. So it is a very intimate film in that way as well, and I'm really glad that he did it and went for it. Yeah, so I truly say go and give it a watch if you haven't yet, even though if you watch the spoilers, I truly hope that you have watched it. Alright guys, thank you as always so much for watching. Let me know down below what you thought about the film, and what is your favorite Ari Aster movie from the 3 full-length films that he has. Let's talk about it in the comments down below. Thank you guys as always so much for your support, and I hope to see you all in our next coffee time. Bye!